Florida State enters as the favorite to win the ACC for the 2024 season. Can the Clemson Tigers or the Louisville Cardinals overtake the Seminoles for king of the Atlantic Coast Conference?
This is the 2024 Locked On College Football Season Preview, only on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
ACC Season Preview is here. I am Alex Dono from Locked On Canes and Locked On ACC. I'm joined by Kenton Gibbs, my co-host on Locked On ACC, also co-host of Locked On Wolfpack. We got Dalton Pence from Locked On Louisville. We got Brian Smith, a.k.a. Smitty, from Locked On Seminoles. Thank you so much for making this ACC Season Preview your first listen and your first watch today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Well, Florida State Seminoles, Brian Smith, they do enter the season favorites to repeat as ACC champions, and that comes despite a lot of changes up and down the roster, Brian. What have the early returns been saying throughout fall camp so far?
The good news is the offensive line is pretty much loaded. They've got a few guys that would probably start at other schools that aren't even in the starting lineup. Darius Washington's probably an NFL player. He's a left tackle. You've got a very deep group of running backs led by Lawrence Tofili. The concern is receiver. Malik Benson, speedster that played at Alabama but only caught like 13 balls last year, is the leading guy. They lost two NFL players, Keon and Johnny. That's kind of difficult. Defense is loaded once again, despite losing a first-round pick. But they have so many players, and I think Patrick Payton is the odds-on favorite to win the league's defensive MVP. So the secondary is good. The linebacker group, maybe not the thickest, but plenty of talent. I think there's a really good chance that they do win the league, and I understand why they came out with a 10th pick by the AP poll.
Kenton, do you co-sign on that with Brian? I mean, you and I have gone back and forth a lot in recent weeks, heck, in recent months about who's going to win the conference. Like, I totally understand why Florida State are the odds-on favorites because they were just there at the top of that mountain last year.
Yeah, Florida State is a safe pick, and rightfully so. I mean, objectively speaking, they are the kings of the castle. Like you said, they're the kings of the hill. In order to beat the man, you got to beat the man. Who can you see beating the man is the question. And the wide receiver room is absolutely a question for this team.
Absolutely.
But the bigger thing is this. If you don't have a good wide receiver room, generally you have a playmaking dynamic quarterback that can make up the difference, or else you may be in trouble. Now, while we talk about DJU and having the highest floor of all the incoming quarterbacks, in terms of ceiling, it's not necessarily there to think that you can compensate for that. So that offensive line and that running game are not going to have to be good. They're going to have to be dominant. They're going to have to be, hey, we get to moving around bodies whenever we want to. We can go ahead and average 4 to 5 yards a carry against the best defenses in the conference. Because while I think that DJ can be serviceable and can get the job done, I'm not sure that if that offensive line and running game are out of whack, out of sync against a team who can offensively challenge Florida State, a team that can come up with a game plan to negate Peyton and those other pass rushers that they got over there a little bit, I'm not sure if the passing game can carry them along for multiple wins. I'm just not sure about that.
Now, Florida State Seminoles, one of several teams who have brought in transfer quarterbacks within the conference. Another of those are the Louisville Cardinals, who bring in Tyler Shuck through the transfer portal. Now, Dalton, I'd love to hear how Shuck has been doing so far because supremely talented player when healthy, and he's got a quarterback whisperer for a head coach, but that "but healthy" has been the asterisk on Shuck so far in his college career.
Oh, 100%. The best ability is availability. If I've said it once, I've said it a million times on the show, and a lot of it is pointed to bringing in a quarterback who Brom has endorsed, but again, there's going to be those risks regarding injuries. Now, the injuries have been as fluky or freaky as you would be led to believe, broken fibula, broken collarbone, but nonetheless, they still are injuries. So bright side, it's not really because of a recurring issue, but sometimes, unfortunately, it seems like some guys just never get the good end of the stick when it comes to luck, as opposed to or as it relates to what I've heard from fall camp, all signs are pointing to the talent being 100% real. Everyone that has watched him play over the past couple months say that this offense should, keyword should, be completely different than what we saw last year. We saw a game manager lead the Cardinals. Brom had to sort of limit the playbook a little bit, having Jack Plummer under center. the belief is this season we're going to see more of a Brom-esque offense that is used to throwing the ball around more. So all reports so far lead one to believe that Shuck is the real deal. Like you said, the elephant in the room is he has to stay healthy, because if not, it doesn't matter.
I'd love your take on the polls that have just come out. The coaches poll dropped late last week. The Associated Press poll has dropped as well. And, coming out for Louisville, they got to the ACC championship game last year, had a heck of a season in Brom's first year back at his alma mater as head coach. Any surprise from your perspective that Louisville didn't crack that top 25?
Personally, I thought if they were going to, it would be in the 20 to 25 range. So it doesn't really shock me, especially since they're technically at like number 26, having the most receiving votes. Yeah. It really just doesn't matter to me. I told some people who were in my DMs just completely up in arms about this. I'm like, my man, it's okay. Because if you handle business, I promise you the rankings will come and it's not going to matter. But I'm not really faulting those who don't necessarily believe that Tyler Shuck can be the guy, or that Louisville bringing in a whole new team, so they have to mesh well. The schedule is tougher. They have to play at Clemson, at Notre Dame. Miami comes to town. SMU is one of those low-key dark horse teams that can really throw a wrench in your plans. So, and then you have Kentucky on the road to end the season. So if Louisville would have finished the season 10-2 but didn't lose the last 3, maybe then we have a conversation. But with the skid at the end of the year, I mean, it's at the point where I didn't really think Louisville was going to end up in the top 25 to start the year, but they have a good chance to be in it by the time they play Georgia Tech and potentially Notre Dame after that.
Kenton, was there any surprise there from your point of view? And there are 4 ACC teams that are ranked in the preseason top 25, Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and NC State in that order, with Florida State being the only inside the top 10 at number 10. Did you think Louisville or even maybe another dark horse should have been in that top 25?
I was surprised that Louisville wasn't, because of how the media views Louisville. With all due respect to DJU, a lot of the media looks at Louisville as the DJU of the ACC. What do I mean by that? Louisville was picked to finish 4th in the conference by the media members who were at ACC Media Days, and yet they were the only team inside the top 6 to not have a single vote to win it. So everybody believed this team will be good. They will be effective. They will cause problems. They cannot get it done in terms of winning it all, winning the big enchilada. And so with that being said, it's not much of a surprise that if that is your brand regionally, because ACC Media Days doesn't feature 90% of folks who are like, oh, you're from California, you're out there in Colorado, you're out there in Washington, you're out there in Texas, ACC Media Days is mostly us ACC media folks. That's folks who are in the area, folks who are watching these games week in and week out. And everybody looks at that team and says, they'll be good. I'm not sure if they can win it all. So I'm not surprised that they're not in the top 25. But what I will say is this. I have said I don't believe Tyler Shuck can stay healthy. I stand by that. That is something that I 100% am going to rock out with until I see otherwise. However, if, and that's a big if, this is one of the bigger ifs that I have ever said loud and clear, if Tyler Shuck can't stay healthy, I have no doubt that Louisville doesn't finish any less than 3rd. But that's if he does not miss a single game, which I highly doubt. I highly doubt. That man has been missing games since me and Brian Smith had firm hairlines. So I really and truly doubt that he has the ability to stay healthy throughout an entire season. But if he can do it, I think that Louisville has a good chance of ending up in Charlotte.
Brian, the hairline looks sharp, in my opinion, for you. But I'm curious because Dalton talked a little bit about Louisville's schedule. What do you make of Florida State's schedule? And what do you think are going to be in the – got some tough non-conference games. Notre Dame is a non-conference game. What do you think about potential roadblocks and biggest challenges this year?
I talked about this on my Locked On Seminoles show. Florida State has to have discipline. You and I talked about this with Miami recently, too. Florida State was 90th in the country last year in penalty yards. When you get into road games like Notre Dame, 90th. Every coach says we're going to be a disciplined football team. It's the biggest cliche in the world. But Florida State's own athletic department did a little mic'd up session the other day, and he's talking about let's have technique and all this. He's going around talking to all these kids. Let's do things right, be fundamentally sound. They were 90th in penalties last year. There's nothing pretty about that. And they still went undefeated in the regular season. So, but they lost a lot of that talent, like Kenton talked about. They had 13 guys go to the combine. That's insane. So if they're not more disciplined this year, road games at Notre Dame, road game at Miami, those kind of things can be iffy. Then they open, it's a weird deal. They're playing Ireland on the 24th against Georgia Tech. They can score. I don't know if they could stop me if I was the running back. They were next to almost the bottom of NCAA in rushing defense last year, 221 a game. I mean, that's horrendous. By the way, Kenton, if you need Florida State to run the ball good, just watch the game against Georgia Tech. It may be a farce because they may go for 3 bills, but Georgia Tech can't stop anybody. They're
listen, if like you said, if we were the backs against Georgia Tech with the defense they had last year, I mean, I'm not saying that they'd be saying Dalton for dope, but that campaign might get started in Louisville. You know what I mean? It may come up. So, I'm not looking at that game as indicative of whether or not Florida State's run game can be dominant. However, they do have some much taller tasks headed their way in terms of showing against some formidable run defenses. Hey, can you do this against just the Georgia Techs, which is surprising given Brent Key's personality that they can't stop the run. That is extremely surprising to me. But with that being said, Florida State will have plenty of opportunities to show, hey, this ain't just against Georgia Tech. And I'll tell you what, if you struggle to run the ball against Georgia Tech, you do know there's going to be.
It's over. It's over.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. If you can't run the ball against Georgia Tech.
They get 50 yards in that game, I'll let you come on the podcast and you can talk for the entire 30 minutes. You can have at it because there won't be any reason for me to go on the show for about a month. Okay? That's a bad defense. It's a bad defense. There's no hiding that. They don't have the personnel. Florida State's loaded up front, and they got 2 or 3 running backs who will get paid. You better be able to run the ball against that team. So yeah,
well, they might sue the Dublin Island Airport if everything don't work out. Florida State love to get you on the court now. And I ain't talking about Coach Hamilton and company. But we ain't gonna go there. Not today. Not today.
Well, I did want to actually briefly go there because it's covering Florida State right now, Brian, must be super interesting, but also super challenging because you've got a football season coming up where the expectation is to win the conference for a second straight year, a conference that the fans don't even want to be in anymore. But the expectation is to win the conference. The expectation is to get into a 12-team college football playoff. But then the elephant in the room are the lawsuits and conference realignment chatter. How do you navigate that? And how do you feel like Florida State fans are navigating that right now? Because seems to be as many updates from Florida State folks about the lawsuits, if not more updates on that than about the actual football right now.
You're right. In the very first part, they are really, really over the ACC. I try to avoid the topic for the most part on my show, even though it gets a lot of views because people get really angry really fast when they find out it's going to be years before this, at best, is mitigated and taken somewhere else. 26 or 27 is best scenario, from what I've heard from people that are much smarter than me that are lawyers. So that's not what they want to hear. Fan stands to short for fanatic, and they don't have a lot of patience. It is what it is. So I do a little bit of it, but I try to stick to football stats and recruiting. I just do what I know because I don't want to be in that courtroom any more than my hair wants to grow.
Now, as we've established, Florida State, they are favorites to win the conference. FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On, does back that up. Over under 9.5 wins for Florida State. But I still, Dalton, I feel like with all the changes at Florida State, there are opportunities for others. We're going to talk about Clemson. We can certainly talk about Louisville, but I'd love your take from a Louisville point of view. What's it going to take this season for the Cards to do what they almost did last year, because they got to the championship game, but to get over the finish line this year?
As ironic as it was, perhaps the worst team in the ACC laid out the blueprint on how to beat Louisville about close to midway through the season. That was Virginia. Thursday night game, they forced Jack Plummer to throw the football. And basically, Miami followed suit. Thankfully, Louisville had some kind of fluke mishap plays and got the win. Kentucky made him pay. Florida State absolutely shut Plummer down. USC, sort of the same thing. Now, better teams that they're playing against, but still, that was the blueprint. So I say all that to say that losing a player like Jawar Jordan with turf toe, losing Jamari Thrash hurt, you arguably have a better supporting cast around your quarterback this season, but it's clear that the quarterback play has to be there. And Kenton said it best. Tyler Shuck has to be healthy. That's the first thing, is that I'm not sure if what the trust levels are going to be like with a guy like Pierce Clarkson or Brady Allen behind him, but all expectations in Louisville right now are that you can be right back up to that double-digit win total, even with a tougher schedule, because the belief here in the 502 is that the team is better, almost pretty much at every position outside of maybe running back. And you bring back Ashton Gelati and Quincy Riley to a defense that was not expecting to have them. It's big-time news when you can have two potential all-ACC first-team guys. And I'll be honest, I may be biased, but I'd put Riley up against any cornerback in the league and Ashton Gelati in the same regard. So to answer your question, long story short, the expectation is that you're in competition to get back to the ACC championship game. And I think anything lower than a top 3 finish would have a good amount of Card Nation, probably a little disappointed.
Now, Kenton, I want to talk about Clemson as well, because they show up in every top 25. They're one of the top 3 contenders, if you go by the FanDuel odds, to win the conference this year. And of course, they were the flagship program for the ACC for a long time when Florida State had some lean years. They won 2 national championships with Dabo Swinney, but they become so polarizing because Dabo doesn't use the portal. A lot of people doubt Cade Klubnik for obvious reasons. He's had so many ups and downs, but it's still a super talented roster and a very well-coached team, Kenton, because we've already seen Dabo Swinney. We've seen what he can do in so many big games over the years. So where do you think Clemson fits in this tapestry of how the ACC might finish?
Clemson fans are going to get mad at me, and they're going to say, oh, you're talking bad about us because the lawsuits and you don't believe in the ACC. I think Clemson is a train headed in the wrong direction. I think that the refusal to use the portal is going to catch up, because when everybody else is getting better and you're staying the same, what de facto is happening? You're getting worse. I think that Clemson this year is a 9-win team at best. And I am so disappointed to say that. I would happily be wrong. If they pop out another 10, because I believe they won exactly 10 last year. Am I correct there? I believe they won exactly 10.
Yeah, I believe so.
Either way you cut or slice it, I don't think that they've gotten better. I don't believe in Cade Klubnik's decision-making. Everybody keeps saying he got better. Look at the defenses he was playing at the end of the season. Look at how he performed against legitimate defenses at the end of the season. The fact that South Carolina, the Gamecocks, gave you fit. Listen, I don't need to say too much outside of that. Okay, that objectively speaking, I think that Clemson is always going to be
9-4 last year. By the way, not 10.
9-4. I'm sorry. I think we see another 9-4. I think we see a repeat of that. I think that team just no longer has it because of Dabo's refusal to use the portal. I think if they would have gotten in the portal like NC State did this offseason and gotten them some playmakers at multiple positions, everybody keeps telling me Williams isn't the best receiver on Clemson. It's Brown. Brown was just healthy. Williams is the game changer. He's the guy that if you put the ball in his hands a lot, he can blow the lid off the thing. Brown isn't that type of guy. With that being said, can Phil Moffitt carry the entire load, and can Cade Klubnik be better? I'm not sure. I'm not sure both of those things come to fruition. So with that being said, I see Clemson at best at another 9-4 at best.
Brian Smith, your record prediction for the Florida State Seminoles this year?
11-1.
Who's the one?
That depends. Either Miami or Notre Dame. They'll lose one of the two. If they win both of those, even if they lost another game they shouldn't, they'd be probably as good a bet to win the ACC title game and be in the playoffs. So,
what about you, Dalton, for the Louisville Cardinals? Put you on the hot seat here. What's the record going to be 2024 football season?
Bang, bouncing back and forth. I'm going to go optimistic. I was optimistic last year. It paid off. We're going to do it again. I'm going to go repeat of 10-2, losses to Miami and at Clemson.
Wow, all right, so we got another 9-3 prediction for Clemson. We got 11-1 for Florida State, 10-2 for Louisville. Got a lot more to come here on this ACC preview show, by the way. Could Miami and NC State make a run in the ACC? Or could a dark horse like Syracuse be ready to rise up? That's coming up next here on our ACC preview show. Guys, we all love going to live events, whether it be sporting events, concerts, even musical theater. You can get all these tickets on the Gametime app. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Gametime Picks it filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. And guys, there's also a special deal coming up. Gametime gives you 50% off Labor Day for Diamondbacks Dodgers. How much fun is that? Guys, Gametime is the only ticket app that I use, and I'm a procrastinator. Gametime actually rewards that because the closer you get to first pitch or kickoff, the prices get lower. You can save up to 60% off buying last minute at Gametime. The view from your seat feature is an absolute game changer at Gametime. You can see a panoramic view from your seat before you buy. So what you want to do is take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Guys, football season is almost here. Florida State and Georgia Tech coming up. ACC football, we are loaded. Guys, summer has been plenty of fun with the Olympics going on, NBA Finals, Stanley Cup Finals. But, guys, football, that's what it's all about. And all you have to do is open up the FanDuel app and dream up bets anytime you're in the mood. And you can start locking in your ACC championship picks if you like Clemson over or under 9.5. If you like Florida State over under 9.5, Miami over under 9.5, you can start locking in your preseason bets right now on FanDuel. There's a reason why this is America's favorite sports book. And by the way, it's still summer, and all summer long, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Maybe some other contenders for an ACC championship. Talk about the Miami Hurricanes, who I cover on Locked On Canes. Talk about the NC State Wolfpack. Jackson and I are outnumbered here because we got Kenton and Grayson Boone from Locked On Wolfpack. We got Jackson Holzer from Locked On Syracuse. Syracuse is going to be a super interesting one to cover. And Jackson, I'll start with you with the Cuse. And we were just talking about how polarizing Clemson is. Syracuse's quarterback is very polarizing. Kyle McCord transfers in from Ohio State. Excellent team season last year. But a lot of people look at Kyle McCord as maybe someone who was holding the Buckeyes back last year. What's been the talk around McCord so far fall training camp for Syracuse?
Well, I think the deal with McCord is, first of all, I think he's the best quarterback that Syracuse has had in a decade, like by far and away. I mean, we saw at the spring game when he was just throwing it around the field. And what I've said on the podcast is that it's the zip on the ball. You can see the talent that he had in high school and at Ohio State. So he's just really, really talented. Now, as far as the concerns with Kyle McCord, I know there's a lot of people that say that he held back Ohio State. I think he's just a victim of the past three Ohio State quarterbacks. CJ Stroud, Dwayne Haskins, I'm leaving one out here. Justin Fields is the other one. Those are 3 first-round NFL draft picks who all set the world on fire. They were the best quarterbacks in the country. Kyle McCord is 4th. He comes in. He does a nice job at Ohio State. Yeah, he had great weapons around him. He did a nice job. He was top 10 in the country in QBR, which I would consider pretty good. But he just wasn't a first-round NFL draft pick, so a lot of people didn't think he was very good. And, oh, by the way, if you lose that game to that team at Ohio State, people aren't going to like you very much. So overall, I think McCord is really solid. I think I'm excited for him. I think most Syracuse fans are excited to see him finally play for us. I really, aside from Ohio State fans, I really don't understand the hate for him. I think he's a solid player.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. All three of the teams that we cover, Miami, Syracuse, and NC State, have transfer quarterbacks this year. As we introduced Grayson Boone from Locked On Wolfpack, there's another Grayson in Raleigh, Grayson McCall, who comes over from Coastal Carolina. Consider me a fan. To me, I think he was one of the hottest commodity quarterbacks in the transfer portal. He finds a home in nearby Raleigh. What have been the reports and the experience you've had so far covering McCall?
I've certainly been knocked down the Grayson power rankings in the city of Raleigh here these last couple of months, but there is a palpable buzz around this program in 2024 that I'm a lifelong NC State guy. I have not felt this type of anticipation my entire life. Grayson McCall was probably the most ideal selection as a quarterback to get in the portal. Everything that Coach Doran has been preaching about, his leadership, his moxie, the ability to adapt to any type of offensive system. He really feels like the perfect fit for this team this season in 24. And everything we heard about him speak down at ACC kickoff, he's ready to go. We're talking about a three-time Sun Belt player of the year, three-time Sun Belt player of the year at Coastal Carolina. He has over 10,000 passing yards in his career, accounted for over 100 touchdowns. He's been through it all. He's seen it all. He's ready to take his talents up a level now in the ACC. But NC State fans should be really excited about what he brings to the table.
Yeah, and Kenton, for more on that, NC State's super talented team. They got a lot of playmakers on offense. You can always count on them to show up defensively. Do you think Grayson McCall could be the missing piece?
Oh, absolutely. But I think, well, actually, let me rephrase that. I don't think Grayson McCall is the missing piece. I think all the pieces around him make him the missing piece. I think that this is one of the deepest, most talented skill position groups that we've ever seen at NC State. And I mean ever, going back to the days of Ted Brown. I mean ever, going back to the days of Jericho Cotchery and Torrey Holt. I mean ever, as in forever, ever, NC State sports, okay? This is a group that you look at top to bottom. There are guys that are on the bench this year that are going to be rotation guys this year that may have been KC's right-hand man last year, because with all due respect to those young men, that pass catching, the receiver and tight end room, either they were not utilized properly or they were completely devoid of talent. So, this is a situation where we've said a lot. Grayson McCall doesn't have to be Superman. He just has to be a man that gets the ball out on time, and that is he is on time and on target. And I know a lot of people look at his last year and say, oh boy, I'm worried, because he looked really bad at Coastal under a different system. I am here to tell you all today the bad news about a man named Tim Beck. He continues to fail forward in spectacular ways. If I had Tim Beck's agent in the dating world, I'm on my, fifth or sixth failed relationship, I would be dating Megan Thee Stallion by this point. You understand? That's what's going on with Tim Beck. I don't know how he keeps getting these jobs, but he keeps failing forward every single time. So, honestly and truly, I don't look at last year as representative of him at all, because, again, the guy pulling the strings, calling the offense is Beckless, not good at his job, very bad. So I'm very interested to see what his bounce back year looks like under Robert Anae, who said this is the best that he's ever seen a quarterback pick up his offense in the history of his career. And Anae, he's not a young guy. He's not exactly a spring chicken anymore. So he's been around a few quarterbacks who had year ones with him.
Speaking of transfer quarterback stealing headlines, you have Cam Ward arriving in Miami, and this is the guy that almost every Miami fan wanted when he became available in the transfer portal. And Miami was able to get it done. It was a bumpy road because he had declared for the NFL draft. He decided not to follow through with that. Decided he wanted one more year in college, improve his draft stock. And I'll be honest, before I had a chance to start covering Ward, personality-wise, I didn't know what to expect. Given the whole NFL saga, I thought, is this guy, I don't know if he's a bit of a diva. Is he kind of Hollywood? Totally blown away by the experience that I've had covering Ward. I don't think this guy has any hobbies outside of football. He does fish, actually. I think that's the one hobby. But other than that, he's he's all about business. And one of the things that I was blown away with by Ward, within 24 hours, he knew the names of every one of his teammates, including walk-ons. Whenever he's not fishing or practicing, he's doing off-schedule workouts with his receivers and tight ends and running backs to get the timing down. He's taking a very business-like approach to his 1 year coming up at Miami. And with that comes the expectation with him being named preseason ACC player of the year. He does have odds, I think, around the top 12 preseason for the Heisman Trophy. So there are a lot of expectations that come with Ward. And so I kind of wonder, Kenton, if Cam could end up being the missing piece at Miami, because, they were probably consistent quarterback play away last year from maybe being a 10-game winner instead of a 7-game winner. Kneel down aside, maybe a 9-game winner, if not for that knee that wasn't taken against Georgia Tech, because it was a very bumpy ride with Tyler Van Dyke last season. You never knew. Certain days he would look like Superman. Other days the interceptions just wouldn't stop. So if they can find more consistency and more playmaking ability from a guy like Cam Ward, because then the other thing, Kenton, is Miami also on paper, and I know with Miami we always talk about on paper because they have made a habit out of falling short of expectations, but they've got the most proven wide receiver core in the ACC, returning a 1,000-yard plus guy in Xavier Restrepo, an 800-yard plus guy in Jacoby George, and getting Sam Brown, who transfers in from Houston, had more than 800 receiving yards last year. Miami's got a good offensive line, so it's an offense that looks like they're ready to succeed this year.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? You said that he was the guy that all the Miami fans wanted. He was the guy that all the Miami fans, all the Florida State fans, all the Louisville fans, all the Washington fans, you name it. If you needed a quarterback, your fans probably thought, hey, this is our guy, unless you knew he was out of your price range like NC State fans. There was never a doubt that, hey, we're going to come up with that 1.5, 2 mil, whatever his going price is. We're going to come up with it. So, he was a guy that everybody and their mama wanted. Is he the missing piece? That's to be determined. I want to say no, only because I don't trust Mario Cristobal, and he needs to have such an abundance of talent. It's hard to say that one guy is enough because, again, anytime you think of Mario Cristobal, even if I was to tell you, take away the knee or the not knee that was not taken against Georgia Tech, what's Mario Cristobal's most memorable moment as a Miami fan? What would you say, Dono? As a guy who covers the team, what would you say is the most memorable?
A lot of recruiting wins. a lot more recruiting stuff than game day stuff.
And that's my point. At some point in time, you have to translate all of the talent that you're bringing in into on-the-field wins. You have to do that. And Miami consistently underperforms. And it's not just a Mario Cristobal problem, which is something that it starts to make you feel like you got bad juju working, a lot like NC State, to where year after year after year, they were the team of next year. Oh, next year we're going to get them. Next year is going to be the year. And it never really materialized. So I have very similar concerns about both teams in that it's not really about just what you are this year. It's about the history, not just recent history, but even if we go back long, you have this thing where you're going to get the best players. You're going to recruit the state of Miami well, but what happens when it's time to put on those pads and kick the ball off? It just, there's always something. So Cam could be the answer if Mario and crew can get together in terms of the coaching.
Yeah, and the coaching questions, that's going to be there for Cristobal until he answers them. Like, until he answers, those questions are going to be there. But like you hinted at, the problems at Miami have been a lot deeper than when they're calling timeouts and kneel downs. Because, again, I know they've recruited some flashy players over the years, but they haven't in 20 years had depth. It's been a huge problem. You lose a couple of offensive linemen, the whole team falls apart. You lose a receiver, you lose one running back, the whole thing falls apart. To Mario Cristobal's credit, as a program builder, the guy is elite, right? And you try to compensate for the game day decisions with the caliber of talent you put on the field and on the bench. And this looks to me like the deepest Miami team that I've covered going back to like the early days of Randy Shannon. Like, it's been a long time since they've seemed to have built up this much talent on paper, but you're 100% right that there has to be a wait and see approach with Miami. That you look at, even the team like Florida State that just won the ACC last year and should have been in the playoffs. A team like Clemson that seems to be a little bit on a downward track, but Dabo Swinney has shown you he can win national championships because he's done it twice. Miami doesn't have that benefit of the doubt the way that some of these other programs do. Now, I want to get more from Jackson here because we talked about Kyle McCord, but on the playmakers as well, on his weapons, because I'm a huge fan of Oronde Gadsden II. I know his daddy, who used to play for the Miami Dolphins. He was injured for most of last year. Is he 100% recovered? And talk about some of the other weapons that Mr. McCord's going to have to throw to.
Yeah, so first off, Gadsden, by all accounts, he's good to go. He's ready. I was actually calling the game that he got hurt, and I remembered when he went down, and I was like, oh, he's in a boot now on the sideline. That can't be good. And then lo and behold, before the next game against Purdue, they announced he's out for the season. And, back then, and I know I say back then, it was only a year ago, Syracuse didn't really have many weapons around him. They really didn't. So when he goes down, they have LaQuinn Allen, who's an all ACC running back in his own right, but that was it. Now you look at this year with the weapons around Oronde Gadsden, and I said on the podcast that I think he's actually going to have less yards than he think, but it's not because of his talent. It's because I think the weapons around him are really good, and you're going to have to spread the ball around. So you got LaQuinn Allen out of the backfield, who can also catch passes really well. Zeed Haynes, a transfer from Georgia, burner, complete burner. That's what he is. Jackson Meeks, a veteran, big wide receiver transfer from Georgia. That's nice. And the sleeper, or really, I'll give you two sleepers to keep an eye on. The first one, Colorado State transfer Justice Ross Simmons. Just keep your eye on him. He's pretty good. Okay, he's pretty good. He can do some things. And Dan Villari is the backup tight end. But the best way to describe Dan Villari for those that don't know who he is, he's essentially the college version of Taysom Hill. He can do a little bit of everything. He was a quarterback at Michigan. He transferred over to Syracuse. He's played bits and pieces of quarterback, but not really. But he could still throw it a little. He can catch. And I don't know if you guys know this, but he actually won against Pitt last year, ACC running back of the week.
That's right.
So he can literally do everything. So Gadsden, of course, he's the best player on Syracuse, bar none. He's the best player, the best NFL draft prospect they have, but the weapons around him are also improved compared to years prior.
Now, Jackson, if I could put you on the spot, Syracuse's record in 2024 is going to be what?
So it's funny because I get called crazy no matter what. I get called crazy no matter what. So I think 8-4 is my prediction. So a lot of national people say that I'm nuts. How can you pick Syracuse to win 8 games? Well, they have the easiest schedule in the country. Go check ESPN. That's why.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yes. No Clemson, no Florida State. They don't have to play Notre Dame either. The toughest game is Miami at home, and we'll see how good or bad Miami is. That's the toughest one. They also have to play at NC State. That's going to be a tough one too. And I also get called crazy from Syracuse fans because they say the same thing. Look at the schedule. How do we not win 10 games? So no matter what, I'm getting called crazy on both ends here. So I'm sticking with 8-4. And if you actually go check the odds, you go check their over-under, it's at 7.5.
That's right.
So I'm only saying slightly over what Vegas thinks. I don't think I'm that crazy, but it seems like everyone else thinks I'm nuts.
Now, I want to see if Grayson and Kenton are in agreement on NC State's record. Grayson, I'll start with you. The Wolfpack are going to win how many games this year?
I have us winning 10 ball games. Now, the number 10 has eluded NC State since all the way back to 2002. That's actually, ironically, the only time NC State has ever won 10 games in a season.
Is that Phillip Rivers?
Yeah, it was Phillip Rivers, yes. Dave Dorn has talked about how badly he wants this program to get to a point where they're winning 10 games somewhat consistently. The fan base is desperately wanting to see that 10 number in the win column. I think that this year, with all the weapons they brought in, this is the year that it's going to happen. Now, the 2 losses, I actually have us losing to Tennessee in Charlotte. That'll break my heart, but that's going to be one hell of a ball game. And then I have us falling into a trap. I think Georgia Tech is going to get us on a Thursday night down at Bobby Dodd. Now, you might...
I know how that feels.
Yeah. You might make note. Well, don't they play Clemson? Yes. I have NC State going on the road and beating the Clemson Tigers since the first time since I have NC State going on the road and beating the Clemson Tigers for the first time since 2002. Special year, but this year in 24 will be special as well.
All right. Well, Kenton, have some guts and give me a 12-0 prediction.
Oh, no. Me and Grayson are in lockstep here. 10-2, but I think a different game is your trap game here. Here's what I see happening. They lose an ACC game to Cal on the road. That's the game that they lose. And the more I think about it, the more I want to say 11-1 because I don't believe in Tennessee's defensive line the way everybody else does.
Okay.
The more film I watch on those guys, the more I'm like, this is tough. It's tough to say that they're world beaters. I think that if you let them get you behind the sticks, they will appear to be world beaters. When they get in that speed package, listen, it gets nasty. They have 3-4 guys, or they had 3-4 guys last year that they could just send on all these freaky blitz packages. And I'm sorry, not even blitz packages, just twists and stunts out of that front four that were devastating the offensive lines. Number one, they lost their leading sack guy from last year, or their second leading sack guy from last year. Number two, Pierce is, while people say he's supposed to be a number one pick, he's a little too light in the behind. You cannot be a bookend at 240. That is not how this game works. That's not how it's going to play out. I'm sorry to you, brother. It just ain't in the cards for you. And so I look at that team and I say, if NC State can find a way to run the ball effectively enough to not let themselves get in predictable situations, they can win that game. So 10-2, maybe even 11-1. But I got my eye on that Cal game. I don't know why. There's something about Jade not in that team.
It's because our guy Lawrence Ross talked us into Cal winning the thing.
Even before Lawrence, I was worried because NC State has a history of losing that game that they shouldn't. And that's what they like to call NC State stuff. So I believe that NC State is stuff to stuff. I believe the Final Four run last year might have did it. But we'll see. I got them at 10-2. Maybe 11-1, but I'll stick with 10-2 as my final prediction.
Now I'm going 10-2 for Miami as well, and I know Kenton's going to try to say I'm being too bullish, but I mean Josh Pate from the Late Kick 24/7 Sports. This guy has no Miami affiliation. He picked 11-1 this year, so I'm not even being as bullish. I cover the team. I'm not as bullish as Josh Pate. Now Kenton, he's trying to get me all worried about kneel downs and timeouts. If you're blowing every team out with Damian Martinez and Cam Ward and Xavier Restrepo, Kiko Mauinoa on D, I'm not worried about that. Now, I do think Miami's going to trip up a couple of times. Obviously, I'm concerned about the Florida State game. I think Miami will have a shot, but I do not take Florida State for granted. I definitely don't take Louisville for granted. You know, Dalton from Locked On Louisville was on with us earlier. That's going to be a tough road game for Miami. And the opener against Florida, it's super interesting because Miami has more talent than Florida, and Florida's offensive line apparently has been a little problematic during fall camp. But at the Swamp, first game of the year, you don't really know what to expect. It'll be Cam Ward's first game in a Miami uniform. But, you know, if you're looking out for some sleepers on Miami, I think the tight end room this year is going to be resurgent. They had some injuries and some issues. They only had 18 catches as an entire unit a season ago. Elijah Arroyo is healthy again. He missed basically the entire past 2 seasons. He's really looked dominant in practice. Also, Miami's got a freshman tight end who's, you know, he's kind of like Miami's Taysom Hill, I guess. This guy lines up at virtually every position. Elijah Lofton, I think he's going to turn some heads this year. So, yeah, I think the coaching issues will be less prevalent given that the talent finally seems Miami caliber. It's not been that for quite some time. So I'm going to go 10-2 for Miami. And huge thank you and shout out to Jackson Holzer from Locked On Syracuse, Grayson Boone from Locked On Wolfpack. Kenton and I will continue because coming up next, we'll discuss who's going to win this thing. You want to keep it locked right here to our ACC season preview. And guys, I already know you're keeping it locked to Ibotta. I'm so glad Ibotta is back with us here on the Locked On Network. It's summertime, which means it's barbecue season. Stock up on all your favorite grilling favorites and earn cash back on every purchase when you use Ibotta, so you won't have to choose between burgers or hot dogs. You can have both. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns, get this, $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. And you're getting all this cash back on stuff you'd be buying anyways. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much, but with Ibotta, you earn cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is yours. And right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store, download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, all one word. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. We've heard from the contenders and a couple of dark horses who could possibly win the Atlantic Coast Conference this year. Football's almost here, by the way. Kenton, another team that may not have been represented here, but you and I have been very high on this squad on Locked On ACC. Virginia Tech could sneak up on some folks this year. That's definitely one of those games I have circled on Miami's calendar. Miami gets them late September at home for a night game this year, but they got a lot of talent this year, Kenton, and Kyron Drones going to be one of the most exciting quarterbacks in the conference.
Kyron Drones is electric. There is not a single thing on the football field that he cannot do. The word of the day for Kyron is consistency. Consistency, consistency, consistency. Do you have that release the same way every time? Is the footwork proper every time? But I'm telling you right now, in terms of ceiling, in terms of who can do it the best at the highest, there is not a single player, Cam Ward included, Grayson McCall included, Preston Stone included, you name it, Kyle McCord included. There is not a single quarterback healthy. If you gave Tyler Shuck adamantium bones, I still would not say, in terms of ceiling, there's anybody that clears him. I think there are guys that are on the same level, maybe slightly above. I don't think there's anybody that clears Kyron Drones. Now, if you combine him making a jump with a defense that against the run could make a jump, that would be scary. That could be dangerous. That could spell a trip to Charlotte for the boys from up there in Blacksburg. It really and truly could, because again, that team has it all. When you talk about, I know I like to get into the weeds of speed packages and blitz packages and all that. Virginia Tech's got some of the best. They've got some of the best. And they've got DBs that are not just aggressive. It's like all of their DBs are converted receivers because everybody can catch. All of their DBs, if you throw up a gimme, it is truly a 50-50 ball with their secondary, with guys like Dorian Strong and company. So they're a team absolutely to watch out for. And you talk about stopping the run. Well, maybe you could get the help of an all ACC defensive tackle Aeneas Peoples coming on over from Duke. I'm very interested to see how this season plays out for them because I think very, very highly of this team.
So do you feel like there's any dark horse contender we haven't talked about or given enough respect? Because I also I wonder about Georgia Tech, just given how good their offense is. But then I feel like their defense, if it's most of the same personnel as last year, and if they play like they played last year, that might eliminate them from contention automatically. But the two Hayneses, their quarterback and their running back, Haynes King, the quarterback, Jamal Haynes at running back, I think are a great combo. They got their top two receivers returning from last season. So how far do you think a team like Georgia Tech can go? And what about, newcomers like SMU? SMU has a lot of hype coming into this year, and there's a little hype for Cal as well.
Out with the old, in with the new. I don't want to talk about Georgia Tech and that lousy defense. They couldn't stop a runny nose down there in the 404. So let's talk about the Pony Express, shall we? Yeah. Let's get on board for Dallas. Listen, y'all know how I feel about SMU, and it's not going to change until they show me otherwise. I don't believe that they have the potential to win it right away, but I think they could spoil it for a lot of teams.
That's a great point.
They have the opportunity with the way their schedule is set up. They have the opportunity that even if they're not in contention, which it is possible that they could be, I just don't see that in the cards for year one. But I would not be the most surprised if they pulled a Vegas Knights. I wouldn't. I'm not kidding. Wouldn't be super surprised there. But what I do expect from them year one, They have multiple teams on that schedule. They're going to be right up there against it potentially toward the end of the season, right up there against, hey, are we going to make the ACC championship? We're right there in the hunt. And SMU says, absolutely not. We're closing the door. Good night. Good night. Hey, more power to you. Hey, I know y'all are calling us Miami West because of all the hurricanes that we have on this team. It does not matter.
Oh, it's funny.
Brett
When I was
Lashley,
at ACC Media Days and I covered Lashley's a former Miami offensive coordinator, and like half of their players played at Miami. I feel like I knew all those guys when I was at the ACC Media Days.
And let me tell you something. In terms of offensive minds in this conference, Brett Lashley is, I'm a cast technician, and our saying is number one, second to none. That is what Brett Lashley is in terms of offensive minds in this conference. I don't think there's a single offensive mind in this conference that I say they can give Brett Lashley a run for their money. Now, the question is about that team, the trenches and moving up a level. Those are two things that you look good. You could do it against, the American Conference and the occasional Power Four. How do you act when it's every week it's a Power Four? How do you act when you run into that gauntlet of, damn, this team was supposed to be bad, but they're physical. They just beat us up. We won the game, but that was violent. We're walking out of here with some lumps and bruises. How do you react to that as opposed to having some weeks where you virtually get the week off because you're facing a lower end group of 5 teams?
Who's your ACC champion this year?
Yeah, they're going to say that I have my red colored glasses on. They're going to say that I'm being a homer. But damn it, we're bold on this show. I'm going with the NC State Wolfpack. I think that they get it done this year because I have a feeling that Anthony Belton is going to make himself a ton of money. Now, let me tell you why that's important. For those of you who don't know the name Anthony Belton, he is the left tackle from NC State. If he can neutralize Peyton from Florida State in the conference championship game, to where you have to move
they're getting the championship
side,
game. I see it.
To where he's a sitting target. You look at the other guys in the conference that you talk about, hey, he's a hell of a pass rusher that NC State has on their schedule, because they do have some of those guys that are, they're dominant pass rushers. Towards the end of the year, if you look at what NC State did in terms of establishing an identity of leaning on teams and running the ball, phenomenal. And now you have better weapons than you have maybe ever seen coming out of NC State in terms of your wide receiver core. The biggest weakness on this team is the linebackers. And guess who Big Game Boomer, who take his list with a grain of salt, named the #1 linebacker coach in America, Tony Gibson. So I say to myself, all the stars have aligned. Coach Kevin Keats of the basketball team has stuffed the NC State stuff. It's time for this team to stop stepping on the rake and proverbially hitting themselves in the face when that championship is right in front of them. And I think Doran gets it done this year, in a year where the ACC is just down for a lot of reasons. Down for Mario Cristobal reasons, down for Dabo refused to use the portal reasons, down for, just a myriad of Florida State. You have to be able to throw the ball. You have to be able to throw the ball. And I'm not sure if you can do that. I'm picking NC State. I think that they come out on top in a very zany year.
I'm going to go with Florida State until proven otherwise. Now, I think there's a number of teams, Miami included, NC State included, who are capable of winning this conference, Clemson included as well in that, who are capable of – I don't think Florida State's going to run away with the ACC like they did last year, but I am a firm believer in the old Ric Flair quote, to be the man, you got to beat the man. And so I'm going to keep Florida State on top until proven otherwise. But I'm definitely not sleeping on the teams that you and I cover, the Wolfpack. I'm certainly not sleeping on the Hurricanes. I mean, you talk about to be able to win in this modern day of college football, you have to be able to throw the ball. I believe Miami will be able to do that for the reasons I stated, Cam Ward and the weapons. But another thing that I like about Miami is, in theory, they can dictate the tone of the games because they also have Damian Martinez and Mark Fletcher running behind what should be a very good offensive line anchored by Jalen Rivers at left tackle and Francis Mauinoa at right tackle. So I believe there's a number of teams that are capable of winning this thing. And that's, to me, what makes the ACC so exciting this year. Now, Kenton, last thing, is the ACC getting slept on too much? Because all the narratives have been on the expansion SEC, the expansion Big Ten, Power 2 narrative that no other conference matters outside those two. But you can't deny there's a lot of talent in the Atlantic Coast Conference. In fact, they've got more players on the Maxwell Award watch list than both the Big Ten and the SEC. So the ACC has a lot of talent. For whatever reason, folks still kind of, I think the lawsuits have a lot to do with it. Just the perception of the ACC is so negative because they're getting sued by two of the teams in their conference.
Yeah, the perception is not reality here. The perception is that the Big 12 is getting paid more, they're more stable, everybody's more happy over there. That's not the reality. It's just not. It's objectively speaking, the numbers bear out, that's not the reality. You look around all these conferences, you say, oh, the ACC is just not in the same league. In terms of blue chip players on their rosters, the ACC is by far the closest to the SEC and Big Ten. So, this is a situation where the ACC as a whole is going to be much better than people believe, because there are a lot of teams that we talked about today. Somebody's got to lose these games. And the teams that are going to lose, I believe they're going to lose big time. I think we have multiple teams that are not going to scratch 5 games. I really do. I think there's some easy free eats, as they like to say, on some of these team schedules. But there is a group at the top from about 6 up that I think that this is going to be a horse race where teams are running neck and neck until the very finish of this thing.
Yeah, no, it's going to be exciting. And hey, the ACC takes center stage in Ireland on the 24th of August. Florida State is taking on Georgia Tech. We, in a recent episode of Locked On ACC, we try to kind of talk ourselves into, hey, could Georgia Tech pull off the upset? Probably not, but there's a reason why they play the games. So we'll see. It should be a good year this year for the Atlantic Coast Conference. Thank you to all the amazing hosts who joined us and talked about the way this thing is going to play out. Huge shout out and thank you to Kenton Gibbs. He also hosts Locked On Wolfpack, and he hosts Locked On ACC with me. I am Alex Dono. I also host Locked On Canes. And thank you guys so much for making this ACC preview spectacular your first listen and your first watch today. Make sure you subscribe to all the great podcasts on the Locked On Network, available on YouTube, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey app, wherever you get your pods. And we'll talk to you guys again next time right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.